Everyone, good morning. It's a wonderful Sunday morning today. If you're hearing me and seeing this video clearly, could you do me a big favor and just type a one in the comments box just to give me some reassurance that this is going out clearly. All right, so here we are today. This is episode 10 in the weekly series I've been doing. Had a little break for a couple of weeks, but because I was busy with other things, but back on the horse again. So today we're going to talk about, are you ignoring your greatest marketing asset? All right. So as usual, I'm going to start with some bold assumptions here. So I'm assuming that you're watching this because you're the owner or manager, or at least planning to become the owner or manager of an optometry practice, an audiology practice, or an ophthalmology practice. And you're also here because you are actually interested in growing such a practice. Just a heads up that if anything that I talk about today resonates with where you are in your business right now, then you can always book a free one-to-one Zoom call with me through my agency website at opticsdigital.net. So this is what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to talk about why finding new patients is becoming harder. We're going to talk about why clinics lose patients. We'll talk about why a patient audience is your most valuable business asset, and the difference between a patient database and a patient audience, because those are not the same thing. So before we do that, so who am I? Well, so my name's Paul Salloway. I'm the owner of Optics Digital, and I've been in digital marketing and web consulting since way back in 2008. In the end of 2022, I started Optics Digital Marketing, and this is an agency that we began working with optometrists, and since then we've grown to also work with ophthalmologists and audiologists who need structured marketing systems to help them grow. And we've got a client portfolio of more than 20 sites now. So let's talk about why is getting patient attention harder than it used to be. Well, one thing is advertising costs are continuing to rise. So I read a statistic just the other day that Google cost per click, like the average cost that you would have to pay to get one person to click on your ads has risen 12% from last year to this year. So that's a big jump, obviously. And it's not just Google either. It's happening with Meta, like Facebook ads, Instagram ads. Costs there are going up as well. And I guess we can speculate as to the reasons why, but it seems as though one reason is there's more and more competition for paid placements, paid visibility, because organic visibility, the free online visibility that we all know and love, is becoming harder and harder. And the AI story is part of that, So often when you're on Google now, when you're searching for answers to a question, you get those AI overviews at the top of the page. And, if you get the answer right there, then you really got no incentive to go clicking through links to, potentially like blog posts or or knowledge-based articles that might in the past have led you to a particular service provider, like a clinic or something. So a lot of people are getting the answers they need from Google's AI overviews, which is meaning that to really get yourself in front of, or really to make that first connection, Google they're kind of saying we're becoming a pay to play environment more and more every year. So AI is definitely, I think, part of that rising advertising cost story. And so AI is also changing the way that patients discover clinics and discover business vendors in general. So a lot of people now are turning to things like Chat GPT, asking very detailed. We're not even really calling them keywords anymore, but prompts. Like people are asking Chat GPT questions like, can you recommend an optometry practice near me that does orthokeratology that's open on Saturday mornings, and also offers eye tests for children, something very detailed like that. And Chat GPT is one way of finding an answer for those types of queries. And there are other AI platforms as well, large language model platforms as well, of course, like Claude and Perplexity and Gemini and what have you, Grok and so on. So AI is becoming another way that patients connect with healthcare providers. And so AI is becoming, in many ways, AI is becoming the gatekeeper there. So if AI is not recommending your practice, then where's your visibility? It's just not there anymore. Even traditional Google search is becoming a lot less predictable. If you look at, if you go on like Google Images or something and you do a search for the Google search engine results page from 2015 or something, 10 years ago, it was pretty much the traditional blue links. If you're in the top 10 organic search results, then that was a ticket. That was a ticket to getting new patients. That was a ticket to getting business growth. And that's why, that's how the whole search engine optimization industry developed, was essentially like gaming Google's algorithm to get yourself onto that page and near the top of the page. But if you look at the typical search engine results page today, so you've got a lot of stuff on there. There's the paid ads at the top. Then there's like, you got things like Google puts people also ask, that sort of like toggle menu. People also search for, you've got maybe like video thumbnails that they're pulling from YouTube. They're pulling from Reddit, from like these forums. So that whole page is a lot busier now than it used to be. So I think the one saving grace is that the Google Maps results, the top 3 results from Google Maps, what we call the local map pack, that's still there and that's still prominent. And that's why when I talk with clients, I emphasize to them that it's really important that we focus on improving your visibility in Google Maps. And I did a whole video on that a few weeks ago, which you can go back and check out. Competition's increasing in most markets. So, especially from big corporates, they've got marketing budgets, the Specsavers of the world and so on. Even Specsavers and some of these other big chains, they're even moving into industry verticals where they weren't before. So like more and more of these sort of vision care chains are also moving into hearing care as well. So the marketplace is becoming a lot more crowded than it used to be. And another reason why I think it's harder than before is because trust has become a scarce resource. I've seen articles which talk about like the level of trust in online content is decreasing year after year. This is kind of the irony, I suppose, of living in an era where information is more plentiful than it's ever been, and the barrier to entry for generating information is lower than it's ever been. At the same time, people are becoming more and more skeptical about what they see and hear and read. So, I got to speak for myself. Like if I'm on YouTube and I'm watching something and it becomes apparent that I'm not watching a real person, but I'm watching like an AI generated avatar, my interest level plummets quite dramatically. Given that that's becoming harder and harder to do, of course, too. So like the AI avatars are becoming, a lot closer to real humans, but There are still a few tells that you can, that will let you know that perhaps you're not looking at an authentic human doing the presentation. So let's talk about why. Why do patients leave your clinic? I think in general, like most professional services are very sticky, whether that be like, your dentist, your lawyer, your accountant, um, and I think particularly so in healthcare because it's a very personal sort of like, it's a high touch environment. So uh, generally people stick with their healthcare provider, but nevertheless there is some attrition, there is some churn that happens, and it can make a really big difference to your business if you're able to reduce that churn. Unfortunately, most clinics communicate very little between visits, so often the annual recall is the only touch point from one year to the next. I know for a fact, like people go that they have a routine eye checkup, never hear from their clinic until 12 months later when they get an email, if that, right? Um, and so during that time, patients forget what makes your clinic different, right? So, they might remember the name of their optometrist, or they might remember the name of their audiologist, um, but they really don't remember all of the other things about your clinic that differentiates you from the clinic down the road, right? So they probably see all the expensive complex equipment that you've got in your office, but they don't really know what any of it is for, or the value that it potentially gives them. Why should they, right? So that's why the value that you bring to the table might no longer be top of mind 12 months later. I've already talked about how competitors have bigger budgets. There's TV ads, there's online ads, all the other things. So people are always getting these other messages, and particularly in changing economic times like we're in now. So the reasons why maybe your patient selected you in the first place might change. If they've become more budget conscious, they might consider going to maybe a more like a low cost healthcare chain, perhaps. At the same time, also, I think that there's a strong argument to say that the healthcare market in Australia has bifurcated. So people often talk about a K-shaped economy, and I'll probably talk more about this in coming weeks. But what they mean is that some people are really struggling, like the costs of living are going up and up and up, wages and salaries not really keeping pace. On the other hand, there are people who are doing very well. There are certain demographics of people that are going ahead better than they've ever done before, and so that creates a real challenge for businesses to figure out, like, what is their market really, and what is their market strategy when you've got like people whose economic circumstances are changing in different ways. So this changing environment is another reason why patients might churn, because they're looking for something different than they did before. Life events is another big reason, right? So people move. I think in Australia, maybe more so than many countries, people move around for various reasons. So obviously, like if somebody moves from Sydney to Perth, they're not likely to come back and see you. But if they move a few suburbs across, then they might, if you give them a good reason. They might stick with you if you give them a strong justification for doing that. So that's one life event. Other things might be, parents have kids who are just starting school, so they're looking around for an optometrist who can not just serve them but also serve their kids. People have aging parents. People take as parents get older, the children often have to take more responsibility for them, making sure they get to like hearing checkups and vision checkups, ophthalmology checkups, all that sort of thing. So, that also leads people to question, well, if I'm helping out these other family members, maybe I should change as well in terms of like who they go to see. So all of these things can cause patients to reevaluate whether they need to stick with you or whether they could look at someone else. And so the best protection against this patient attrition is engagement between routine visits. So I've talked in a previous live about the one email problem. This is the thing where clinics rely on sending out one email at the end of 12 months, asking people to come back for their annual visit. You're really putting a lot of weight on that one communication attempt, when it would be a lot better, a lot more effective if you can maintain engagement with your patients throughout the year, not just a one-off thing. So this is where your patient list, your existing patient relationships, are your greatest asset, and it's an asset that you should be leveraging. And I want to make the distinction here between a patient database and a patient audience. So I know for a fact that, and I see it with some of our clients, where they say, well, every 3 to 4 months we export a list of all our patients from our patient management software, and we just send out a newsletter to the whole list. Well, I think there's a few problems with that strategy. So you're talking about emailing, sending out an email blast to people who are not necessarily, expecting to get that from you. And I won't go into the whole legalities of it, because that's above my pay grade. But there is something in Australia called the Spam Act, which places like limits around who you can email, in the sense of like a cold email. And I think it's a bit of a gray area as to whether emailing your patient database actually falls within the definitions of what you're technically allowed to do. So I know people do that. I know clinic owners do that. So your mileage will vary. But on top of that, it's a really bad idea to just send out an email blast from your own email account. Okay, so if there's one thing that you can take away from this live event is don't do that. You run the risk of getting your email account flagged as a spammer, which means that you wind up on blacklists, which means that your routine email communications never arrive in people's inboxes, right? That's a bad thing. So if you're going to do any kind of email marketing, you should always use a dedicated email marketing platform. So there are many out there. You've probably heard of MailChimp. There are others. The one that we like using is MailerLite. A lot of these platforms, they give you a free account where your first 500 subscribers are free. And I think that the monthly cost is really quite reasonable for most of them. So just emailing your database cold like that, that's not the same thing as building an audience. When I say an audience, I'm talking about people who have stuck up their hand and said, yes, I want to hear from you. They've indicated through their actions that they want to have, or they want to be engaged with your clinic. So how can we do that? So I think one way is to create opportunities for these voluntary opt-ins. So one of the things that we try to do with clients is to get them to create some sort of like a patient survey form. And the idea behind this is that after someone has had after somebody has had an appointment with your, with your optometrist or your audiologist or your ophthalmologist, when they've had an appointment in your clinic, then the staff can just ask them, "Hey, would you mind filling in a little patient survey for us? We're just trying to get some feedback from our patients." And part of that form could be an opt-in box, a checkbox. When they check that box, they've given their consent. They've indicated that they are happy to receive further communications from you. So I think that's the best way to do it. I think that's the safest way to do it. Um, I see I see a lot of websites where, like, somewhere down in the footer there'll be this like lonely looking sign up for our newsletter box. Um, that almost never works, because why would people sign up for something when there's no clear value of what doing that action brings them? I think you've got to be much more explicit about giving people a reason to sign up. And this could be something as simple as like a PDF, a freebie that lists, like 10 ways to manage eye strain, right? Or 5 signs that you might need to get your hearing aids checked, or something like that. So, once you've created it, there's really no further cost to you, and it's a valuable information resource that people can get also for free, simply by providing their email address. So having those kind of freebie opt-ins, we call them lead magnets. So that's another useful way of getting starting a relationship with people who may not necessarily even be a patient right now, but they could be in the near future. By getting people into this contact list, it gives you a channel to share useful educational content with them. So this means things like blog articles. I've talked before about how having a content marketing strategy is really important. You should be generating content that explains the services that you provide, the value that you bring to the table, what makes you a professional who can really make a difference in people's lives. So email is a really great way of bringing that type of content to people's attention. Video is another thing. Like, I really encourage all our clients to consider adding a video strategy to their marketing mix. I mentioned before that trust is really declining. Online trust is declining, but one of the things that you can really counter that is by putting your face on video, like putting yourself out there, creating a YouTube channel. And yes, the first few videos that you make will suck. I can guarantee that, but you will get better at it. You just got to trust the process, right? So everyone's uncomfortable and not so good in the beginning, but practice makes perfect. Trust me on that. So yes, sharing useful educational content. This is another way that you can turn your patient database into an audience, people who actually want to hear from you. I get emails every probably a couple of times a week from one source. There's a guy in Melbourne who works with digital marketing agencies, and I could easily unsubscribe from that email list, but I don't, because I'm genuinely interested in hearing what he has to say. So this is another point. So if you're providing value and it speaks to people's interests and needs, then they're likely to be very receptive to that. So I think an important strategy to keep in mind here is to segment your messages by interests and needs, and make sure that the messages that you're putting out there are relevant. So what do I mean by that? Well, with the sort of opt-ins that you provide, you could give people a way to indicate what they're really interested in. So as part of your patient survey form that I talked about before, you might have a couple of check boxes where you ask them, where you ask the patient, would you like to hear about more of any of these topics? And if you're like an optometry practice, it might be like dry eye treatment, it might be myopia management, it might be contact lens fitting. Give people a chance to indicate what would be of interest to them, and then when they do that, you can segment your messages and only send. Let's say you're sending out a communication about contact lens fitting. There might be a new contact lens brand that you've got in your practice. Well, the first audience to send that to would be all of those people who have indicated explicitly that that's what they're interested in. Okay, so when you can segment an audience or segment audiences like this, the frequency with which you send out messages becomes less of an issue. So I've had patients say to me like, oh, we really don't want to send out too many messages. We don't want to annoy people. Well, if you're just sending out bland, generic newsletters, then yeah, I can understand that. But if you're sending out information, messages, links to resources that people are actually interested in, I don't really think that that's as big a concern as you might believe it is. So leverage the human face of your practice, right? So this is where small independent healthcare providers really have an advantage over corporate chains, and I think often they don't realize that. Add a human face to your online presence, so that means like photos of your staff, your social media feeds, like regularly adding photos of and videos for that matter of like behind the scenes things, show new products. Like if you're an audiology practice, you might have a new line of hearing devices that you've got in. So show the people in the practice, like, actually demonstrating that. So I think like adding a human face so people can see that these are real people running a real local business. This is one way that you create an audience. So what could this help you achieve? Like what does building an audience actually do for you? Well, several things. So word of mouth referrals, okay? You're going to get more word of mouth referrals from people who are actively engaged with your business. They're people who consume the content you produce. They're more likely to say to a family member or a colleague or a neighbor, hey, I just saw this video by my local optometrist where he talked about this thing called Ortho K, where you can wear these contact lenses overnight and then you don't need glasses through the day, right? A lot of people don't know about this. A lot of people don't. Well, I'd say most people probably don't fully understand all of the things that you do. Ophthalmologists, very much in the same category. Like people, maybe they've heard of LASIK. Maybe they haven't heard about things like Smile. Maybe they haven't heard about things like Presbyon. Maybe they haven't heard about, the whole gamut of eye procedures that you could offer, elective eye procedures. So when you build an audience of people who are interested in what you're doing, and provide them with a story or resource that they can share, they're more likely to spread the message for you, which would be great. Reviews. Now, I talked a few weeks ago about reviews, online reviews, particularly Google reviews, and how they are a really valuable part of your online presence. I see some clinics that on their website it says they've been doing business for 10 years, but then when I look at their Google business profile, there's maybe 16 reviews on there or something, and it seems like a bit of a disconnect. Why aren't there more reviews if that's the case? But if you're engaging with an audience, this gives you opportunities to say, look, if you like if you like the service we've provided, if if you've been if you're happy with your last visit to us, then it would really help us out if you left a Google review. And often the thing about Google reviews and reviews in general, I suppose, is that people, if they're happy with the result they get, not typically incentivized to leave a review. If they have a bad experience, then they are. There's a lot of research that says that if somebody has a bad experience, they're likely to tell 15 people about it. Whereas if you've had a good experience, you might only tell half a dozen. So the way to counter that, of course, is to actually ask and tell people, we try to support our local community. We're here to try and help people like you. And if you want to help us in that mission, then one way you can do that is by leaving a review. So when people understand all of the things that you do and understand how it benefits them, then they're more likely to upgrade to the more premium services, the more premium products that you offer. So if you're an audiologist, right? So maybe you've got patients who are they've got the most basic hearing device, the most basic hearing aid model. When they discover all of these more premium options that might be available to them, like the in-ear canal, options, the things that are the ones that are much less visible, then some of them, a percentage of them, are going to upgrade themselves to that more premium product. Same applies with with eyewear. If people understand the value of getting better quality lenses or multifocal lenses, right? So then they're more likely to upgrade themselves to that, and it makes the whole in-clinic experience a lot easier for you when you're starting off with patients who are educated about what you offer and what that means for them. So this is part of the benefit of building an audience. You're educating people, making them aware of the value you provide, and all of this leads to increased patient loyalty. So I again talked several weeks ago about what is the value of one patient to you over their lifetime. So the longer people stay with you, the more they are worth to your business. The longer they stay with you, the more likely they are to upgrade to these premium products and services, the more likely they are to recommend you. So long-term patient value increases when you create engaged patients and build patient loyalty. And all of this, of course, reduces your dependence on third-party marketing channels. So if you're putting all of your eggs in one basket and you're relying on Google ads for new patients, if you're relying on Facebook ads, if you're relying on SEO, so all of these things are important, potentially important parts of your marketing strategy. But I think at the end of the day, the most valuable, possibly the most reliable strategy and channel is your existing patient audience. So these are people who know you, they like you, and if you can leverage this group of people, then it means that maybe you don't need to spend as much on continually bringing in new people into your system. So how can you start building an audience, right? So I've talked before about creating an email list opt-in. So again, you need to make it worthwhile. Just putting a little sign up for our newsletter box at the bottom of your website is really not going to do anything. You have to give people a reason. So it could be these freebie lead magnets, these the information resources that I talked about. It could be something like opt-in for our premium brand club or something like that, or VIP members club or something, where you notify members about new brands that you might have in your practice, or new styles, new products, new services, all that sort of thing. So people like to feel a little bit special. So if you're offering some early access or exclusive access, maybe a discount, um, this is a really good way to incentivize opt-ins. I would say also look at your social media strategy. So what I typically see is either clients, they do all of the behind the scenes stuff. So like, this is us at the local restaurant. This is me talking to the local cafe owner, and all that kind of stuff is great. Excuse me. Or they go in the other direction where they're just posting photos of like, these are the latest um, uh, uh, these are the latest Swarovski frames we've got, or these are the latest Tom Ford frames in our clinic, and it's all product. So I think that there's a case to be made that you should try to reach a balance between those two things. So yes, very important to emphasize the human face behind your business, but I think you also have to let people know, like, what it is that you sell. I mean, at the end of the day, it's revenue that keeps your business going. So I think it's worthwhile just reviewing and getting the right mix of content there. Your Google business profile, right? So I think most business owners, most healthcare providers, they maybe create a Google business profile and then they ignore it. Okay. That's a mistake. So I think your Google business profile, you've got several opportunities. One is Google business update posts. So with your Google business profile, you can actually upload like an image and create a bit of text. So it's kind of like a social media post, but not really. And I'll explain what I mean about that. When people are on social media, when they're on their Facebook feed or their Instagram feed, typically they're just scrolling, killing time. It's the problem they're solving is boredom. Whereas if somebody's on your Google business profile, they're there for a reason. It's typically because they're looking for a service or a product. So your Google update posts are an opportunity. It's kind of like free advertising. It's an opportunity for you to really promote whatever it is that you're offering. So whether that be like a particular type of hearing service, like if you might use your Google business update posts to talk about tinnitus treatments or something like that. If you're an ophthalmologist, you might use your Google business profile update posts to talk about like cataract treatments, that sort of thing. So I think that Google business profile update posts are a great free kick for your business. Not enough clinics are taking advantage of that. I think it should be something that you do. I think once a week is a good cadence to get there. Reviews, right? Another thing. So I've mentioned how important Google reviews are. If somebody leaves a review, then reply to the review, reply promptly. Even if you have to designate someone in your team who has like manager access to your Google business profile, so they can respond to that. So if I see this a lot where people, clinic owners that maybe they've had reviews, but they haven't posted any responses in the last 6 months. Okay, so potential patients see that, Google sees that, and it's not a good look. So yeah, so really pay attention to your Google business profile. Start creating educational videos. Okay, so like this is probably a big hurdle for a lot of people. Most people don't like getting in front of the camera. They think their voice sounds funny, and that's all these sorts of reasons. It's like I said, so practice makes perfect. Is really, if you want to be the clinic that stays ahead of your competitor down the road, trust me that educational videos are valuable. They should be a valuable part of your strategy. So we've got clients who have actually told me I've got a client in Hobart, and he said to me that he actually had a client come all the way from Launceston, the other side of the island, down to see him simply because they've watched one of his YouTube videos where he talked about dry eye treatment. Okay. So long form videos and short form videos. I think that one thing you can do is create a longer form video, which might be like a 20, 30 minutes, even 40-minute video. It could be you talking to the camera like I'm doing now, or it could be, maybe you can get somebody in to interview you. This is something that we do with our clients, by the way, as we schedule Zoom interviews, and then we record those and upload them and we do some editing, of course, and then upload them to their YouTube channels. You can take those. There are plenty of tools available now where you can take these longer form videos and then chop them up into short form. And these short form videos, like up to 90 seconds long, they're great for YouTube Shorts. They're great for Meta Reels, Facebook, Instagram, even TikTok. If you already made the short form video, why not? Why not have a TikTok account? It could be a whole different, a whole new demographic that you aren't reaching. So it's not as hard as it sounds. I think the thing is just to start doing it. Community sponsorship and live events. So this is another thing about putting a human face on your business and creating that audience, creating real human connections. So we've had clients who are very good about doing or holding in-store events, like one client I'm thinking of. So she had Swarovski, like she talked with Swarovski, and they had like some days where they just showcased all the latest frames from that brand. It could be something like if you're an optometrist reaching out to local aged care facilities and doing like a workshop on getting your eyes tested, for elderly people. Community sponsorships are another thing. So we've got clients who sponsor like the local football club, the local cricket club, the local hockey club, even cultural organizations. Like we've got one client who sponsors an annual piano competition, and it's just all about getting your name out there. That builds brand recognition, but also gives you that opportunity to talk with people, shake a few hands. And when people see that you are connected with something in the local community, they're more likely to have a positive feeling about you and feel like they want to engage with you, and they want to be a member of your tribe, so to speak. So I'm going to leave you with one thought here, which is that in a world of rising advertising costs, changing algorithms, AI-driven search, your most valuable asset is a patient who wants to stay connected. So don't sleep on that. Think about how you can build this engagement. Think about how you can reduce the patient attrition, the patient churn, the patient turnover. Best way to do that is by building that audience. So so I hope you've got some value out of this presentation. So if you got a question, please type it in the comments. If I don't answer it now, I'll answer it, get back to you in the coming days. And if you want to speak with me one-on-one, then you can reach out through my agency's website, which is opticsdigital.net, or you can contact me directly through LinkedIn. You can send me a direct message, or you can email me, paul@opticsdigital.net. All right, so let's wrap up there today. All right, so thanks very much for listening, everyone, and we'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.